Hello, everyone. My name's Sarah Lavonne, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so excited to have the infamous Alyssa, I don't even know your name, Alyssa Berlin, whom I was just thinking, how in the world did we get connected in the first place? I think it was probably through your husband.
Yeah, that was exactly what it was. You had done his podcast.
I
and
had.
then he put us together. That's what it was. That's right.
Oh, of course, he's like the most connector person in the entire world, huh?
He's super
That's
special.
amazing. I love it. Well, and that was like probably over a year and a half ago that we connected. So, and it's been, love at first sight and all of that since then.
Limbic rel thinking the same thing.
Right. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background, what you do, what your passions are, your children, I don't know, whatever you want to tell them. Tell us a little bit about yourself so they get to know you.
You already mentioned the hubby, so we'll start with that.
I know. Start with that. Love it.
Ellie, most people know my husband, right? Prenatal chiropractor, Ellie Berlin. He and I have been married. October is going on 24 years, which is super exciting and crazy. We have 4 kiddos who it's amazing how you segue from like different transitions. So we are headed deep into the teen years. So I know a lot of you are pregnant with new babies. You'll check in 10 years from now, right? And really it was after my first one was born that, you jump into the tizzy that is postpartum with little to no preparation. And I was like, there's no way, there's got to be more out there. And it turns out there was very little. And so it really set me on this journey of helping new families and couples prepare for that transition to parenthood. And to that end, I joined the training committee at Maternal Mental Health Now, which is an LA-based, task force to help,
How long have they been around?
I've been with them for I think 5 or 6 years, and they've been around way longer than that. A couple years ago, I joined the advisory board at ICANN, International Cesarean Awareness Network. And I've been working in private practice for the past 13 years, very specifically with pregnant and postpartum moms, dads, partners, birthing, non-birthing partners, and just families as a whole.
Well, you're the perfect person to bring on this channel. I know if you've been following me, guys, one of the things I say all the time is that there is nothing worth your mental health. And that actually came from a birth that I had been at as a birth coach. And she had had a traumatic birth with her first. And we got to a place in that birth where she was being really re-triggered from the first and was asking for a C-section again. And I remember knowing her preferences and knowing gosh, this is so not what she wanted. And where's my role? And how do I advocate for her, whatever. And I feel like God was like, there's nothing worth her mental health. And I just felt so strongly okay, all right, let's do it. And she just had the most positive experience from it. And so, I've always been into that. I'm super passionate about trauma and history of sexual abuse and all of that. And so me and Dr. Berlin have connected not only on that front, but also from a mental health perspective. As a nurse, of course, mental health has to be something that's really important to us. And so I wanted to bring her on here to talk to you guys and be our expert as we get into mental health and what that looks like surrounding pregnancy and especially postpartum. And then you add in the whole pandemic situation that we're in the middle of a coronavirus crisis in the world. And we've experienced so much change and loss and stress and anxiety and mental health problems. I would say depression, OCD, all the mental health stuff that maybe some of you are experiencing. And whether you're diagnosed with something or not, we all are being impacted by this. And so today we are going to talk all about mental health. So we're going to talk about coping with anxiety. We're going to talk about, I want to ask her a bunch of questions, but one of the things that we're going to distinguish between is what's the difference between stress and anxiety. I think that's really important. And then the big question, and this actually, we didn't discuss ahead of time, but I was everybody wants to know if your stress, your emotions affect the baby, the growing fetus inside of you.
Sure.
And then I would also almost want to delve into maybe if we could just touch on the stress you're feeling with your children around as well, and how your kids pick up your stress and your anxiety as well. So we're going to talk all things. We're going to see where this conversation goes. We're going to try not to be on here forever, but if you guys have a comment, a question for her, I do have the little chatty box open, so you can feel free to write something in if you're on here live. Otherwise, this will be available for you to watch in the future if you need to dip out prior to that. And so first and foremost, I think, first of all, I want to know what's the difference between stress and anxiety, because I think we throw those words around so freely and like, oh, I'm so stressed, I'm so anxious. When from a mental health perspective, using those words, they have different definitions. You want to just tell us and distinguish between the two, maybe?
That's right. They have different definitions and they have different meaning, right? And we're, without even realizing it, we're so impacted by the words that we use. And so when we throw out a bigger term, it has a bigger reaction. And in some ways, I want us to first and foremost even reclaim stress, because stress is your body's normal reaction to a real or perceived threat or danger.
Okay.
And it's a good thing, right? It's something that is inborn. It's something that we share with other mammals. And when we talk about stress and our physiological reactions to something, we're really talking about our fight flight response, as most people think about it, or more accurately, our fight flight freeze response.
Okay.
And again, the purpose of it is to keep you safe, right? It's your body saying, hey, something's going on, pay attention, mobilize some resources, and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
We also need some stress to get stuff done. And it's interesting because as we are all in this, shelter in place, if it wasn't for a little bit of stress, we wouldn't really get out of bed, right? And again,
or we maybe just leave and be rebellious about the whole thing. Right?
Maybe. Well, but I mean, even first from this perspective of stress is a motivator. Stress helps us get stuff done. Yeah. Stress is the thing that says, go to work, make some money, take care of your kids, make a meal, as opposed to, I'll just stay in bed today.
Or I'm stressed about getting corona, so I'm not going outside. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, that's a motivator for me, my small amount of stress. About that,
and you know what? And that's huge. And it's something that I have no doubt that many people can relate to you with, in terms of that notion of, yes, stress is keeping you in place. And stress is helping you take an action of, I'll stay put.
Right.
And sometimes we don't realize that doing nothing or staying put is actually doing something. And in this case right now, it's the money shot. It's doing something that's so important. But Yorkie Dotson, a long time ago, talked about this idea that stress has this curvilinear kind of experience. So it's not, hey, if a little bit of stress is helpful, a lot of stress must be amazing. Because we do get to this place where it plateaus and it goes from being motivating and exciting and getting stuff done to immobilizing, where again, we freeze and get stuck.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's in this place that it goes again from something healthy and adaptive and really wonderful in our body to something that's more dysregulated as we segue into some more anxiety stuff.
Okay.
And anxiety, kind of exists on a continuum, like most things in life. And so there's anxiety symptoms, and then there's a full-blown anxiety disorder. But oftentimes one of the easiest and one of the biggest distinctions between stress and anxiety is that anxiety comes with this foreboding and this concern about the other shoe about to drop. So it's kind of like, what's going to happen? And this fear of
anticipating the future and anticipating the worst versus just being like, this is what I'm presented with.
That's right. So it's like, if, then, and what happens when we get into anxiety. So with stress, if I'm stressed about something and I take action, I'll usually feel better.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm stressed about what the kids are going to eat and I do some meal planning, okay, it's got it covered. With anxiety, we get into what I call the yes buts, because anxiety has this tendency to jump. So maybe I'm worried about this, and then I figure it out, and my head goes to yes, but what about this other thing? Okay. I figured out that they have food, but what about this? What about their, my kids are doing, homeschooling with Zoom, but what if they don't get onto their lessons on time? Oh, so they're on their lessons. What about this? That anxiety has this jumping kind of tendency and this
cycle that just, it's one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next.
Right. So with anxiety, whereas we'll do something and we'll feel better oftentimes. I mean, with stress, where we'll do something and it'll alleviate that stress,
Yeah.
With anxiety, it may be momentary relief, but it quickly jumps into that next thing.
Okay.
So stress, completely adaptive. And oftentimes anxiety is taking that stressful sympathetic experience, that fight or flight, which that then gets dysregulated into something more extreme.
Okay. And then it just keeps going. Like there's no,
Absolutely.
whereas I'm like, I'm stressed about taking care of my clients when all this broke loose and I was like, what are we going to do with them in the hospital? But then ultimately, like I got to work and it motivated me to put together some new packages. And then once it was launched, I'm like, I am taking a break. Right?
And especially, and like the bundle birth style, right? The tripods, the wheelie thing.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, I've got you.
I feel better about it.
And you feel better. Yeah. And that's that hallmark.
Yeah.
The other thing to think about is, again, when something then goes, falls into a full-blown anxiety disorder, it's not something that you caused. It's not something we can will away. That's when you've segued into needing some professional help and needing some professional support. And it's when we want you to reach out, talk to a doctor. Hey, this is going on. This is really uncomfortable. And we never want you dealing or struggling on your own. And we can get more into that later.
Yeah. Well, and I would actually, I mean, my question for that is how do you know, like, I guess, of course, with professional help, but like say that we have people watching from all over the world who don't necessarily have resources. So if I know I'm having some anxious thoughts, I'm maybe not sleeping as well, and I'm feeling that like circle thing in my head that I can't let go of. How do I know that it's something that I'm like, okay, I need to pay attention to and put in some coping skills, which we are going to talk about. I see your questions coming in. But also the like anxiety disorder where you're like, I need a professional for this.
Right. And really the hallmark of first of all, if it's disruptive, if it's bothersome, we want you to reach out. But the hallmark of it segueing into disorders is it's interfering with your capacity to function. So you sleep. I'm not able to sleep. I'm not able to get, the activities of my day-to-day, accomplished. I'm feeling just stuck and not able to do the things that my day-to-day dictates.
And that's an indication. Yeah.
Right? Absolutely.
Okay. And a lot of times I would say that I feel like the partners are maybe the ones that are recognizing like, yo, maybe she's not as productive as before. Or like, what's going on with her? There's something off, right? Do you feel like partners reach out to you ever? I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. No, for sure partners reach out, but especially in postpartum. I feel like one of the hallmarks of postpartum, and I talk about this all the time when I work with couples during pregnancy, is that usually it's the partner that's going to recognize first, whether it's on the depressive or the anxious side of the spectrum, that, hey, my wife is struggling or my partner is struggling in some ways. And then again, what I like to always do is help partners and really coach partners of how to gently and productively and softly bring it up to their partners in a way that it doesn't elicit this defensiveness, but it's like you can lean into it and you can really be like, okay, you're putting out a hand. I can feel safe reaching out and taking it.
So could you give us an example of something that a partner, like if a partner was watching this and they're like, I gotta confront my wife or my girlfriend or something on this, like what would be something gently that they could say that maybe would be more well received than like, look, babe, you look so anxious and it's really bothering me and you're annoying now. Like, I don't even know you.
So don't do that. Don't do that.
No.
And also on the not to do, just relax. Oh, just hold the baby. You'll be fine.
Whether you're anxious or not, please don't say that.
Seriously.
Oh, that is such a pet peeve of mine in relationship. I've been told that a few times, as you can imagine with my energy. They're like, just relax. Gosh, you're so much. I'm like, let's just appreciate my passion. So in general, that's a good one.
Like, listen, you know what? First and foremost, it doesn't feel good to be anxious or depressed. And if I could just relax or just will it away, babe, I would have been the first one to do it.
Right. Yeah. Amen. Please.
Right?
What would they say? What would be like just one sentence that would like maybe prompt them to sit down and talk about it, just to get started?
And something that's really helpful in any time you're approaching a conversation with some sensitive information is, do you have a moment? I'd really like to talk, right? We start soft. The first couple of minutes of how you start a conversation is going to dictate the course of that conversation. So if you come out of the gate with guns blazing, you're going to get a gunfight. You're not going to get soft and cuddly. right? If someone's coming at you with an axe, no one stops to say, she seems upset. She seems caring. I wonder what's going on.
Right, right.
We don't do that,
Yeah.
right? But sweetie, do you have a moment? Hey, do you want to come sit down, And then checking in. How are you doing? Right? I'm worried about you.
That space to talk about it. Maybe.
For sure. And it's so cathartic. You'd be surprised because so often people are worried, but what am I going to say? And I'm not going to have the right words. And I want to expel that. Like, it's not even about having the right words. And sometimes it's, I don't even know what to say, but you look like you needed to talk, or you look like you needed a friend, and I'm happy to listen. And then using this like really inclusive language of, what would you think if we reached out? What would you think if we went to talk to someone? Because especially in that postpartum period, anxiety and depression, or whatever hits the gamut across that perinatal mood and anxiety disorder spectrum, which is what we talked about, is a family issue. So whether it's the birthing or the non-birthing partner that's struggling, it impacts the entire family system. And therefore, we want the response to be a family response. So what about if we go check into this?
Yeah.
So powerful, so collaborative, so not finger pointing where the person
I'm in it with you for you to get help. I'm not just going to be like, you need help. Right.
Or again, what's wrong with you? And again, try to avoid the just. If you just, poof, it would go away. Right? Yeah. If you would just hold the baby, if you would just spend more time with the baby, just relax. Right? Any of that. Because again, if it was that simple, they would.
Right.
But when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to depression, it's not something that whoever is struggling caused. They didn't will it to come on, and they can't just will it to go away.
Yeah. I think too, establishing intent and making it really clear, like, look, I am concerned about you because I love you, and I want you living your best life, and I want you so bonded in this time, and I want you to look back on your postpartum experience as being such a happy time, and I don't see you thriving, and I want us to thrive.
Right.
I just
who doesn't ever like to hear that, right?
I know, I want to hear that. Somebody please tell me that.
Sarah, I love you.
Thank you. Thanks. Awesome. Well, I think that's super helpful. So if we backtrack a little bit, if we could just quickly just establish and name some things that, like, especially in this time, that might be sources of stress, like specifically with coronavirus and the like complete shift of lifestyle that we've had now. I could name off 5,000 things that stress me out, but I think from especially looking at what you're seeing in your practice, because guys, she's still meeting with people virtually. And so, like seeing the kind of themes of what are some of the things that are really stressing people out and causing that anxiety. And then with that, I think a lot of times there's power in naming it and going, oh yeah, that's actually going on. Like, let's identify what's going on right now that might be sources of stress or anxiety. What can you say are some of those things?
Oh my gosh, my head is buzzing in 1,000 different directions. Of things
I bet. I know, mine too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and here's what's so interesting, because if we were having this conversation even, 2 months ago at this point, and you were to ask me what I thought was the biggest stressors or the biggest challenges of our generation, ironically enough, I would have told you one is our use of electronic devices, that they are single-handedly interfering with attachment and attunement and really solid relationships. And the next thing that I would have told you is our pace of life, that we are moving so fast that it is impossible to keep up, and it's exhausting everyone in a very unnatural way. You go to work, you work your 8-hour shift, you come home, there's another 8-hour shift or something waiting for you.
Yeah.
And segueing into Corona, it's so wild. And part of what was so challenging in what I now affectionately think of as phase 1 of Corona and quarantine, and we could talk more about that, was this idea that, first of all, we had no idea what was going on. It was something that just came out of nowhere. I mean, I think, what did they say? 1918 was the last time that the US experienced a pandemic. So no practice, unprecedented, right?
Yeah.
And so here we were sent into this alternate universe, right? Where electronic devices in particular, case in point, what we're doing right now, has become a lifeline. So whereas it was interfering with relationships, it's now been a godsend in terms of being able to connect or stay connected with people in the outside world. And so that's like a boomerang kind of shift that happens. That's one.
Well, and somebody just said it's it's like you've seen, so there's so much conflicting information out there. I'm seeing that comment and I'm like, amen. She's like, no consistency. I'm like, that's so hard. It's one thing if we're like, okay, you get pregnant and then this is the process, right? But because we know so little, it's like that unknown of the change and the pace of life or whatever, all the, like, even just like using your devices, accessing this information, like that's stressful. Yeah.
Because it's like we're on quicksand. As soon as we feel like we got a footing,
yes,
they change it and you move to something else. And it's like, wait, what?
It's so annoying. Or like the visitation policies in the hospital for those of like pregnant people delivering in the next couple little bit, that's a word, in the next little bit. Like even for my sister's due in May. And right now I'm not allowed in the room, which don't get me started or I'll have like a full mental breakdown right now. Thank you. I'm going to need you later. But even then there's like this little piece of hope that things will change, or, here, if any of you are in LA, like the Cedars policy at Cedars, where a lot of my clients deliver and my current clients are delivering, the postpartum unit was closed off to the partner as of yesterday.
Are you serious?
Yes. They opened it back up. So now partners can be there. So it's just all the back and forth. Somebody make up your mind, yet they can't make up their mind because like, we don't know very much. And everybody's just doing the best they can.
Right. And another really interesting thing, when you talk about kind of this time frame, it's so paradoxical of things that we used to think a certain way. Now we've been thrown into this antithesis, right? So even if you think about protectiveness, nurturing, what those look like, historically, it would be closeness. I protect you by keeping you close. I nurture you by touching you. And now we're in this environment where protection and nurturing means stay back, keep a distance.
Yeah.
Right. Social distancing, 6 feet away. I love you, so I'm going to quarantine or I'm going to separate from you.
Right.
Which is so counterintuitive in our head.
Well, and even just like the need for human contact and how therapeutic relationships are, even like whether you're talking to you or me, like, or a friend, there is power in just talking about what's important. Somebody else said isolation and lack of physical connection and or help with first baby. Yeah. And that's where like that impacts your relationships too, and then you've moved to the phone and it's not the same and there's loss there. But at the same time, like you want to be grateful for that access, but it still is like, there's still, I mean, for me, it just feels like loss and grief.
And it's interesting. And Harvard came out with a great article really naming grief as, that thing that you're all feeling, it's grief.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, again, one of the things that I'm hearing most often in my practice that are just echoed from, one person after another is also this weird contrast between, but what if I like it? What if there are parts that I'm actually happy about, but there's so many people who are struggling so deeply? And it almost becomes like this guilty pleasure of, am I allowed to enjoy parts of it? In that larger context of people struggling.
That's so real. Yes. Even for my business. Like, I mean, I can only speak to, I'm not pregnant and I live by myself and I am like the most extroverted person ever, but just speaking from my experience, like there are certain things about my business that I'm like, I will never do an in-person prenatal again. Like, and I love my clients, but the traffic I have to deal with, like, and I feel bad about that. I'm like, should I want and feel like I should prioritize being in person when really I think we can accomplish the same thing and just be more without it? Like, I feel bad about that. I'm sure.
Or even if you or I were to tip down these cameras and look again what we're wearing from the waist down.
Right. The sweatpants. I'm actually in a skirt. I'm cheating because I like actually did some work today. But yeah, no, that's been me every day. Even if I'm on camera, like my shirt looks cute and I look good from here up and it's sweats or no pants, let's be honest.
And that's it. So I have to go back to wearing full on clothing.
Totally. Yeah. And then what about money? Like I just am so burdened for everybody who's lost their jobs.
Right.
Talk about stress. Oh my gosh.
And that's it. And there's so many, right? There's the stress of a lot. There's the stress, which, unfortunately we experience very personally, but, having a family member that's sick. There's the stress of, being just, with someone 24/7, right? So normally, we're in this really nice flow with our family and our partner in terms of we're together, we're apart, and we've got this routine. And if it feels too big, I go take a drive, and now it's this 24/7. We're here.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding with this environment is that whatever is kind of just being concentrated. It's like coronavirus is this giant battery ready for people to tap into. So if I have a leaning towards depression, it's easy to go whoosh and really feel a deepening in that depression. Yep. If I have a propensity towards anxiety, again, there's this battery waiting for me to plug in to intensify that. If I was struggling with my partner, if there were things that, I don't know, bothered me or annoyed me, well, again, now there's this concentration of being exposed to it on such a deeper level.
Right.
And it's hard. It's hard because also we're in an environment where we used to be able to multitask and come in and out of focus on family, move into parent, move into, work. And now it's like someone turns all the switches on. And now I'm constantly thinking about everything 24/7. Right. I'm working while balancing kids, while balancing partner, while balancing home, because all systems are go 24/7. And it's exhausting.
And that to me, all systems are go is like a anxiety. Like when you are working that hard in so many new ways and with so much change, like all systems go would be to me a description of what anxiety looks like.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and here's again, where does that anxiety come from? If come nighttime, I can't check out and settle down, one of the biggest indicators that it's anxiety.
Yeah. Tell me some of the symptoms. Like, what are some like tangible things that may help people identify if they're experiencing some anxiety? I know I can speak from my experience. Like, I had a pretty meaning super traumatic experience a couple years ago, and I never struggled with anxiety prior to that. Like, I mean, I could relate because I'm an empathetic person, but not really. Let's be honest. And after that, like,
what?
Like, I mean, like when people would tell me that they have anxiety, I'm like, okay, yeah, but like I never experienced it in myself in that way. That like was where like I would go into staring fits or like have like physical symptoms that I was like, oh my gosh, is this really it? Because I'm not even thinking about anything. Like I this is just like my brain doing something to me. And that's where like it was easier for me to help identify how so much of anxiety is not your own. Like, of course you can be triggered by it, but it can just come out of nowhere, and like how annoying that is and how much grace we need to give people. So anyway, back to my question would be, what would be some tangible symptoms that people would have?
And it was funny. My protest was, it sounds like you were questioning like your quality of being an empathetic person. Like, I'm an empathetic person kind of, and I'm like, no way.
It was like specific to anxiety. Like I could be like, yeah, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. And I believe you. But it took it to another level when I was like, oh my gosh, this is so annoying. And like, I can't function right now,
That's right. Right now we're kind of lumping all of anxiety together, and that works for what we're doing. And so there's a lot of different parts. There's, the cognitive thought part, there's the worry associated with it. And a lot of times when someone struggles with anxiety, it's like they have a thought and it gets stuck. And it's like, I just can't shake it. And it creates a lot of physiological symptoms that go with it, which is what you were talking about, the heart racing, the sweating,
That's pressure. That's how it is for me, where I'm just like,
absolutely, right? And that's some of kind of more of like the panic that we would talk about, of why someone would go into the ER thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People will talk about, that sensation in their stomach of butterflies or this tightening and these knots kind of things. So you've got, more cognitive and thought oriented stuff. And then there's a whole lot of physical. And more times than not, when people talk about experiencing anxiety, it really takes root in their body, which incidentally, being trained in EMDR and somatic experiencing, using the body as a means to healing and treating that anxiety is so much more effective than just trying to talk it through. Because remember, anxiety has this really great quality that it knows how to yes, but you. Yes, but. Yeah. Right. So if we try to logic it through, it comes up with that argument, or it's very quick to, kind of adapt to whatever cognitive thing you're trying to offer it.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen this with my Corona classes, because like this last weekend I had 2 classes of like, there was a childbirth class specific to coronavirus. And then there's just a follow-up for people who've taken my childbirth classes of like everything you need to know about coronavirus. And I followed up with one of the people on the call, and it was like, I felt like if you have the information and you're doing, like, my final words were kind of like, you do what you can and what you can control to prevent the disease. And ultimately there comes a point where you gotta let go of the rest. And that may be easier for some than others, but I almost think about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think about specific to Corona, like where you've learned information, you're like, I know I have to wash my hands. I know I disinfect things. I cover my coughs. I stay away from sick people. I avoid crowds. Like, that's what you have to do. And if that is like, well, but, it's like, what's the well, buts to me are not productive at that point. It's like, you do what you can. And then it's like, and that was the conversation where I was just like, I know there's so many things like that are the well, buts, but that it was like, nothing was good enough. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I would say that to me would be a trigger. And it was, we actually talked about it, of like the anxiety of how to down regulate somebody from the spiraling, which actually leads me into how to cope with it, because it's the well, butts and it's the bull and the, like the chest and the butterflies and for me, I feel like I have to take deep breaths, like, and that to me is down regulating. It helps to like slow everything down. But what are let's talk coping strategies. I'm sure that's what everybody wants. And then we will answer the question about all of this affecting your baby. I have not forgotten, because that's like,
okay, cool. And I want to throw in two things before we go into coping, because it'll lead right in for us. And the two things is, first of all, anxiety is a tricky critter. And I like oftentimes to label it, give it a name, and be able to acknowledge when it came on the scene. Because that's anxiety, right? And again,
yes,
power. And you,
taking notes.
and again, great coping mechanism. So often we think it's us, but if we can externalize it and be like, oh, anxiety, hi, I noticed you walking in. Don't think you were so sneaky, right? Mm-hmm. That could be really helpful, because anxiety does this thing where it tricks us into thinking, well, you've never done this before. Mm-hmm. You've never had a baby before. You've never been in a pandemic before. So you can't possibly have any tools to bring to the table. So sucks for you, I think.
Right.
And it's not true, because we've all had moments in our lives where we've struggled, and we've all had moments in our lives where we've weathered those struggles effectively. Mm-hmm. And whatever's worked there is going to work here too.
Yeah.
And it's very different to take something and adapt it than feeling like you need to reinvent or recreate the wheel, right? The other thing to think about, right, that really can help simplify is, I want us to kind of talk about like two worlds, if you will. There's our internal world, and then there's this external world around us. And so often, it's this distinction of, I honestly, truth be told, I think about the show Stranger Things, because I feel like people can really relate to that.
Okay.
Right? You've got the world. So
the premise of list, though, because I need new shows.
Well, I only made it through one season because it creeped the heck out of me.
Okay. Thank you for the warning.
Wasn't my thing, but it had this premise of these two worlds. It was like this world outside, which was sunny and it was happy and it was friendly. And then I think they called it like the upside down world, or like the underworld, if you will.
Yeah.
Where it was like gloomy and it was dark and there were things coming out of the corners and things trying to come and get you. And I think about that almost as our internal body and our external world. Mm-hmm. And so often when something triggers that anxiety, it's like we get stuck in that underworld or that upside down world. It's like we get stuck in our body. And now we're playing this game of pinball from one thing after another that's upsetting or anxiety provoking. And so often when we're in that place of that anxiety, it's how do we access or find that door that lets us out of that upside down world back into this higher, more present, more mindful space for us. And it's a softer way to think about it, right? Because it's, again, that notion of, oh, I slipped into the upside down world. What I'm wanting to do now is find that door, and how do I get out? And so let's start with some really simple things that can really help. Mm-hmm. One thing is, for people to look around the room and find and call out 10 colors that they see.
I love this one.
Right? And again, it's like you can do 10 colors, 10 shapes, 10 textures. It's really hard to stay in that internal world and to not be forced into this external world if you are navigating in physically or very, consciously focus on what's around you.
Yeah.
Right? Because it takes time and it takes attention, and just redirecting your attention, game changer.
Right.
Red, blue, green, yellow, is huge. Something else that could be really helpful, and people use their hands kind of as, an analogy of it, is go with your five senses and find something in your immediate world right now that corresponds with it, that makes you smile. Right? So maybe smell, right? The smell of flowers, right? Maybe it's the sight, of your children if it's been a really good, calm day.
Not some other time.
Maybe not. Maybe it's the feel of, you massaging or, kind of rubbing your own feet. But anything like that, because again, it's pulling you into this external world and it's redirecting your attention. Something that could be really super easy is grab an ice cube from the freezer.
Ooh, this is okay.
Right? And the temperature, again, it's hard to ignore.
I heard Lady Gaga doing this. I know that sounds like way pop culture of me, but like on the Netflix, there's a Netflix documentary where she talks about her mental health stuff, which I think is so important. And I so appreciate that she brings it up. But she's like, the only way I could cut it was to put my head in ice water.
That's so interesting.
I was actually talking to someone with anxiety and I was kind of joking, like, well, you can put your face in ice water. And they thought it was really funny. Mind you, it was a lighter moment. I was sensitive to the moment. But that's the same idea, right? That it's like you kind of shock the system.
That's right. And again, you don't have to throw your face into ice water.
You don't have to go Lady Gaga style. That feels very Lady Gaga.
Yeah, 100%. But again, it pulls you out, right? And that's what we're looking for right now. It's how do we find that door that takes us from this internal landscape that's just going from one thing after another that's upsetting or anxiety provoking, and find that door to this external space. In time, and again, with the help of a clinician or with the help of a good friend, depending on the severity, you can go back and talk about those things that are bothering you, and we want to deal with them. But if we get stuck in this fog where, it immobilizes us.
Yeah, this is good. Because I think people think that when you're having an issue, or at least I don't know about people, but I can speak for myself, and maybe some of you relate. You can let us know if you do, because I am seeing your comments come in, by the way. But I feel like people think that when you have an issue, you have to talk it out. I need to call, you should phone in a friend, or gosh, maybe if I just got it out of me, that would help. But you're saying with anxiety, first of all, we got to get you in that external world.
And it's so interesting because, and again, big believer, we want to, deal with the physical sensations. We want, our bodies take a lot longer than our minds to process. We want to make sure, because we don't in day-to-day time, that we give our bodies the time that it needs. Because when we do, it's really that capacity to help something usher move through and out, instead of it always being there that we're constantly having to deal with. That being said, imagine two soldiers on the battlefield, and imagine a soldier sees, a comrade fall. I don't want him in that moment sitting on the floor grieving his friend.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I want him to go into freeze. I want him to heal himself up, and I want him to get to safety. First and foremost, that's what I want him to do.
That's good.
Here's the problem, right? The problem is that so often when we're not feeling the heat of the moment, it's like, I'm fine. I don't have to go back to that. It's okay. And that's where it's like, no.
You got out of it, and now I'm out of it. It's fine.
And now I'm out of it. It's fine. And again, we could go about life, and until something happens that triggers it, it may not really come up. But the problem is that we know heads work a lot faster, but if you didn't give your body due course, it's still in there.
Yeah.
And usually it comes up at very inopportune times. So yes, there's nothing wrong with, in a moment, doing what you need to get through. Huge, important. That's what coping is all about, right? But then when the moment presents itself, we want you also to be able to go in and process. It's very interesting. And a lot of people know that my husband was in the hospital actually with coronavirus.
A whole other episode, PS, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it was very interesting. I had a lot of mentors reaching out. Do you want to do a session? Right? Do you want to? And I'm like, nope. I can't even fathom slowing down right now and dipping into those feelings or that experience. Yeah. I had to take care of my kids. I had to keep it together. I had to keep going. After he came home, okay, now I could go into that.
Right.
Right. But time and place are huge.
Well, and I think
you get to choose.
right. That's what I was going to say, that like, I feel like you have to also give yourself permission
Yes.
to put it on hold, rather than like I don't know, like some friends, like they're like, well, you should this and that. I'm like, no, I'm not ready. But then also being able to identify like, now I'm probably ready for that, and not pushing it to the side. So I'm hearing two sides of it, right? That there's the immediate like response to anxiety that's just this circle. And I think of it too, like, of course I'm the science brain, as are you, but like we have fight or flight, right? And fight or flight is our like upregulated nervous system.
Totally.
We have parasympathetic, that's rest and digest. And when we're in fight or flight, which is anxiety, like it's the cycle. It's like we gotta like say, whoop, no, we're done. And you're like, I stopped it. And that's what you're doing with some of these immediate responses, the colors, the cold, I always say like snap a rubber band on your wrist.
Yeah, and hard to ignore that.
What?
I said, yeah, hard to ignore that sensation.
Right, exactly. Where you're like, oh, but the thing is that you have rational and irrational brain, or emotional and more objective, subjective, objective. And anxiety, correct me if I'm wrong, lives more in the irrational, subjective side, where like, I joke that like I could think there's a missile coming through the wall right now, and like really truly be anxious and traumatized by that thought, and obsess and move myself away from the window, or put up barricades for the window or something, when really like, is a missile going to come through the window? Like, no, it's not. But I have to do what I need to do to respond in that moment. And my anxiety is real, no matter if it's rational or not.
Right.
But a lot of times it takes more of like an objective, like snapping of the wrist or the ice or whatever, to pull you into the other side of your brain, what you're saying, into the outside world. That's how I like conceptualize it in my head. And then you're breaking the cycle of like obsessing and it becoming well, but. And that's the cycle that you're like, oh, and snap the wrist, blue, yellow, white, purple, you know, right?
It's that distinction between what's helping me. I want to do whatever I need to. I want to listen to that stress, and I want to get to safety, right? If I'm having recurring thoughts or flashbacks of it in a way that's not productive, use those resources and get out, because it ruminates and it's not productive and it's not helpful.
Yeah.
When there's the time to really lean into it and do something productive with it, that's when we want to. And it has to be guided by the person, right? So I'll share one of my less than stellar moments. And I remember this was 2 years ago when schools were still in service, or when we're still, meeting in person. That first day of school, everyone's out for, that outdoor, pickup. And I drive my car into a pole. Loud noise, glass everywhere. Everyone's coming, and I'm thinking like, this is fun, right?
Oh boy.
And it was interesting because I had a friend come over to me and she's like, it's fine. It's no big deal. It's only money. Get over it. And I'm thinking like, do you mind if I get in it before I get over it? Like, I promise I'll get over it, but can I have a moment to just be like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
this happened and this feels big right now, right? So again, it's got to be guided by you, of where you are and what you need, and that time and place. If it's helping to get you to safety, it's whatever you need to do. It is truly our deepest, most primal need, is to stay safe, and survive to fight or to live another day.
Yeah.
Right? So whatever you need to do. And sometimes that means going into that freeze to get to there, right? And then again, if it's coming up on you in ways that are counterproductive, you're trying to give your kids dinner and all of a sudden you have the splash into this anxiety, snap, cope, use your colors, use that ice cube, do what you need to be present, because there's little productive that's going to come out of that moment. Later, when it's quiet and you can talk to your partner, or you can, reach out to a friend or a therapist. You go into it in that time that feels safe and productive.
Yeah.
So time and space, and again, guided by you. Totally.
And when it's overtaking your life and making it definitely where like you can't function, it's time to get professional help.
Reach out, call me. I will happily hold your hand. I will talk about, ideas and resources. We will connect you. Either I'm happy to help, or we'll connect you with someone in your area. But no one should have to suffer or struggle by themselves, right? We say that in birth, right? No one should ever have to suffer in birth. No one should ever have to suffer with anxiety or depression or anything else.
Yeah. So let's say that somebody is struggling with anxiety, depression, stress, fill in the blank, you can say whatever. How much of that transfers to the baby, and what does that, or what is that effect on the baby? This is one I get all the time. And especially now I've gotten a lot because everyone's worried you don't want to harm your baby and your baby feels your emotions. Like, let's talk about what the truth of that is and what does the science actually say?
You know, and it's so hard. First of all, it's one of those moments that is that hallmark of being a mom, that we care so deeply and that there's nothing more important in the world than our kiddos, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, let's first start with some very interesting information that came out of Johns Hopkins, which is the idea that mild to moderate stress, surprisingly enough, was actually associated with, you know, intellectual functioning, spurring and advancing intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior. So there was even some really nice positive kind of things that came out. Now, I'm not suggesting don't do this at home, right?
Right.
I'm
right.
not suggesting you go out and
I should make myself stressed out to make my baby smarter. Right.
No.
Yes.
You know, but it's this notion of, first of all, like, let's even lean into that there was some positive effects.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's really hard because we learn more every day. It's still inconclusive. You know, what we do know is that, again, mild, more routine, more day-to-day kind of stress, typically from a research perspective, does not have a negative impact on the baby. And our babies are resilient. You know, it's interesting because the placenta has some capacities even to block the effects of cortisol, which is that stress hormone. Mm-hmm. And we know this, especially when we're getting ready for birth, that the body will release, you know, extra cortisol to prepare for birth.
Yeah.
And the placenta has the capacity to block the effects of it. Mm-hmm. When we get into situations of extremes and prolonged, that's when there have been some indications of some potentially negative outcomes for babies in the short term. You know, so more specific to birth, you know, in terms of going into labor or, you know, birth weight, but nothing that I've seen extends into the long term.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And again, we're talking intense and we're talking extreme and we're talking prolonged.
Yes.
We're not talking normal.
You've been hit from all sides, not like the added stress of coronavirus, we'll just say, you know. And that's the thing too. I think what I hear is that parents are very scared of messing up their kid. Yeah. You know, and that's where I personally, again, you're the psychologist, but like, I just go back to secure attachment stuff where, like, if you love your baby, like, they know that, and you're not just releasing only cortisol and only adrenaline that like has all this negative effect on your baby. Like, of course you're going to be stressed. That is life. And almost like from a non-scientific perspective, that like, we need to be exposed to stress and we need to like learn what it's like to cope with life. Otherwise, like, we know life is hard. And so there's an element of like, there's a balance between that in my mind.
There is a balance, you know, and again, so yes, the research is inconclusive, right? There's some findings that are good. There are some findings that are, you know, a little concerning.
And the concerning though is birth weight and preterm labor.
Birth weight and
preterm labor, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not that like your kid is not going to like be smart, or your kid like is not going to be attached to you, or it's going to affect like, I don't know, the long-term well-being of your baby.
Again, the resiliency. And even as you were talking about, first of all, I couldn't agree more, right? Loving our babies, having the best of intentions. Listen, we all mess up. And those mess ups aren't necessarily bad. Those mess ups create opportunity to create resiliency, to develop coping mechanisms, right? We're all talking about these coping mechanisms. And attachment is not about not messing up and being perfect. Quite the contrary, attachment is about catch and repair. Something happens, I catch it, I notice it, I repair it. Sometimes we have to do things for our kids that they're not loving. And I could tell you, you know, again, my kids are a little bit older, but when my third one was 6, she needed stitches. And she was so upset at me and my husband that we were, you know, letting this man stitch up her head, and was literally sitting on the table being like, give me back my freedom. I want my freedom. And we're like, you know, and like I slept her, you know, I had her in bed with me because just in case she needed anything. And she woke up at midnight. I'm like, what can I do to help? And she goes, I'm still angry at you. I was like, oh, you know. And later on, you know, in time that passed, we talked about it. And she's like, I know you needed to do it for me because it was healthy. And it's like, yes, right. And because we love you. And, you know, we wouldn't be doing
teaching hard is not bad. You know, that to me, like for my own personal life, again, I feel like I'm talking a lot about like my own journey, but I feel like what else do we have to compare to at this point other than where we're at? But like for me, I've had to reframe hard to say, you know what? Hard, I can choose to let hard be the worst thing that ever happened. And I give up and I this and that, or like, well, this sucks. And all right, what's the next step? And then it makes you a stronger, more resilient person, which to me, resiliency in children is one of the top skills you can teach a child.
That's right. That's right.
I see a comment come in. There's actually, she says, it's reassuring because I've had such a stressful pregnancy, deaths, breakup with baby daddy, severe financial stress. People tell me that I'm putting the baby through too much. I can't avoid it. Oh,
so,
okay,
and let's get
I have a lot I could say.
100%. Well, and let's even lean into that, right? Because there's nothing about parenting from a pregnancy perspective, you know, early childhood perspective, that's unidimensional. There are so many things that we do. So here we focus very much on this one thing of stress. Let's talk about all the other things that are happening. We talk to our babies. We love them. We work on eating good food. We work on getting the rest that we need. You know, maybe we work on trying to walk around the block or get some exercise in when we're pregnant. And afterwards, right, we sit with them in bed. We make time to talk. We feed them good meals. There's so many different avenues to how we love and nurture our babies. Yeah. And we never want to get stuck on one dimension when there's so many different good that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And again, ladies, I'm dispelling for you now. There's no such thing as a perfect parent, nor is that our goal. Catch and repair. That's what it's about. When these moments happen and they're inevitable, that we step into something, we acknowledge them. If it requires it, we apologize. I've apologized to my kids on many occasions, right? And then we rebuild. And again, think about what an incredible model that is for life. Right. You know, again, it's almost to that same effect. You're not required to always be happy, and you're not required to always be peppy and always be in a wonderful mood. And what you're also modeling for your kids is you don't have to always be pleasing for me to love you. That we all have moods and we all have moments when I'm happy and I'm sad and I'm frustrated. Oh, good. And we could be real about that because, listen, kids, best BS radar you will ever find. They know if you're struggling and you're putting this on top of it. Right. You can look at your parent and be like, they're not the one I'm talking to right now. Right. Yeah. So real. Yeah. And then again, but we want them to see the whole process. So we could talk about the struggle and we want to talk about the repair. Yeah. Repair. Yeah. And you're teaching them life skills through your struggles, you know? Always. I love that. I think that was probably the best advice and the first piece of advice we got with our son, which was very, very simple. It was whatever you want your kids to do it. Right? It's not this, oh, but I'm saying X and I'm saying all the right things. And that's what they're going to model, they're going to copy. Yeah. It's always very interesting when you see yourself through your kids' eyes or through their skits. I'm like, is that really how I sound? Is that really what I look like? Right? Yeah. Yeah. As they're kind of giving a fake consequence to like a doll or something like that. I was like, right. Like, good little mirror for my parenting. That's awesome. Absolutely. Oh, I love it. So 2 more questions for you. I appreciate you guys who are still on here. I was like, we can do 30 minutes. That's just a joke, you know, and I think the conversation is so valuable. And clearly, like, we could talk more about this. If you guys have other ideas for like one-offs and quick reference guides, kind of ideas of what we could answer or whatever, let us know in the comment box down below. But 2 last things. One that I'm seeing actually come up on the chat is related to breastfeeding and the challenge of breastfeeding and the not only challenge, but like the physical and emotional adjustments that it takes to breastfeed, and any tips for managing the change and trying and continuing to breastfeed. And maybe some of that applies. And even if it does, it's like, yeah, do the things. If you're anxious about it, whatever, reach out and whatnot. But if you have any tips specifically to breastfeeding. Well, and Sarah, you know that I joke all the time that I'm going to title my first book, or now that we're writing a book, my second book, right? That you're more than a pair of boobs. Because truly one of the hardest transitions that I see women go through is, you know, if they've chosen to breastfeed and if that's important to them, that breastfeeding journey. Yeah. And first and foremost, it's, you know, give yourself a good 6 to 8 weeks to really get it, fully underway and feeling good and confident about it, because it definitely takes time. And we often confuse natural with easy. And natural, right? Yeah. Just because we have the capacity for it, it's hard. And it's really, again, like any other relationship, navigating and learning how you and baby really come together in that way.
Yeah.
So what can we do? First and foremost, be patient with yourself. Give yourself a lot of grace as you're navigating it and figuring it out. If it's a mechanical thing that's happening, don't hesitate to reach out. I honestly really recommend that everyone meet with a lactation consultant once. And let's be honest, nothing feels better than someone telling you you're doing great. Don't change a thing. You're awesome.
And then you don't have to keep the cycle. That might break the cycle of anxiety, actually. Because it's like, well, what if this and what if that and what if this? And if you have a trusted source, I feel like I do this for birth stuff or pregnancy or
all the time.
But like, you're like, no, it's normal. Wait, this can't be normal. Really? Yeah, it's actually normal. And if you trust them, that to me, right, it's going to break the cycle potentially.
For sure. And that's why we want to make sure that you're talking to the right person. And the right person is going to be someone who's got some expertise in the area, and not your Aunt so-and-so who maybe breastfed 35 years ago, who really doesn't know much about it and is going to kind of steer you in different paths. So choose your source of information. And I'll say this about breastfeeding, and I'll say this about coronavirus. Choose the source of information very carefully and make sure they're reputable.
Yeah. And not like, no offense to moms and sisters, I see that comment come in, but like, just because somebody else's breastfeeding experience was one way does not make them an expert. They are a resource to you, but they're not an expert. And so for somebody who breastfed 4 kids or 5 babies, like, that's one scenario, and that's one journey.
And what's worse is that so often, right, without rustling anyone's feathers, people's advice is so much more a function of their experience.
Yes.
And projecting onto you,
Hallelujah.
Right? Either what they're needing to still prove to themselves, or come join me in this club.
Yes.
And it's often very little about you. And so, so here's what I want you guys to get good at doing right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes.
Right? Thank you. Right. And then in one ear, out another. Right. And again, you choose, the source of help. Please.
So somebody's asking, so how then do you filter the information when all consultants have biased information that contradicts another?
It can be really hard. And this is where referrals can be really helpful, because if it's coming from, let's say my doctor was great, let's say my childbirth educator, let's say my doula was awesome. If there's already that built trust, use that as an avenue towards, finding your person.
Yeah.
Maybe get one other opinion if you're so inclined, but don't go past that. Too much information does get really confusing.
Yes. And that one, almost like I see parents wanting an answer, and if you don't give it, they're going to go to somebody else until they get the answer that they want. And then there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And of course, it's all going to contradict each other.
And then it's like, I'm so confused.
Right. And then you're like, well, I don't know. And so much of breastfeeding is trial and error. Like, and just like labor, like, does it work? Great. For you, something worked. For somebody else, like, that didn't work. But same thing goes for breastfeeding, that like, you may have to try something for a little bit, figure it out, and then does it work, does it not, and what works about it, and what needs to change, and then you build one feed at a time.
That's right. And 6 to 8 weeks, right? This is a journey.
Yes, you have to know those 6 weeks. It's going to be harder until all of a sudden it becomes the easiest thing you ever do.
That's it. And it's that thing that just shifts. And again, listen to your body, right? Listen to your body about what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And again, I want to come back to this idea that you're more than a pair of boobs. And as we were talking about attachment being more than just, one sliver, so is being a mom, right? We're often kind of, taught that, in the societal perspective that breastfeeding hinges on your success or failure as a parent. And what we want to know, that more important than breast or bottle, is that mom is healthy and that mom is happy. And so
there's nothing worth your mental health.
There's nothing worth your mental health. Bam. That's right. But it's so true. And the whole family is going to benefit from that experience of you prioritizing yourself, or recognizing, hey, mom, you matter. It's not all about baby. It's about, again, the union. It's about the family and what works for the union.
And that doesn't mean that you can't breastfeed. Like,
No.
I too, that easy, it's easy to think, well, I matter too, so just give a bottle. And that may not be your priority either. I know for me personally, like, I would want to exclusively breastfeed and avoid formula at all costs. Not at all costs, but like, I would want to know that I had done absolutely everything for myself. And that's a priority to me personally that ultimately is going to benefit the baby. So,
which is why, if it's important to you, give yourself 6 to 8 weeks. Speak to someone. Give it the time to try.
My reference for you guys, they're going to love me for this, but the people I send everybody to as a breastfeeding resource that I would trust with my life is Goldilocks. I'll put them in the description box below. All of my clients use them. They are phenomenal. They're the most positive, encouraging, flexible, non-judgmental people you'll ever meet. They have breastfeeding classes. I will link them down below. So if you're needing a resource that does virtual everything, they can help you. And I at least can give you that and then the other resource I would say is La Leche League, because we're support groups, which actually we need to talk about. We also need to like wrap up.
Absolutely.
But support groups, La Leche League is a breastfeeding support organization. They're international, all over the world. My mom, when she had me and my sister, she was a part of La Leche League, and they have support groups all over the world. Get in a support group, get in even a virtual one, just to talk to other people's experiences and be encouraged that like, this is so hard, but I'm not alone in what's hard.
And that support is huge. That support in every friend is going to be huge. And really, again, what are we saying? We're not endorsing one or the other. We're saying this is a decision for you to make. This is something that, we want you to figure out. And whatever you choose, there is support to lean into to help that be a comfortable experience. That's right.
So my last question, and kind of like, this was supposed to be like our soft launch celebration because we have a big announcement, guys. And I should have said that at the beginning. But my next question would be, let's talk about ways that they can set themselves up right now. Maybe they're about to have a baby. Maybe they've already had a baby, or maybe they're just like, years out and somehow stumbled upon this channel or whatever, but are looking maybe to have baby in the future. What are some ways to set yourself up and do some preventative measures to avoid the vicious cycle? Or if they're in it, to provide some added resources to help them out?
Absolutely. And we're talking specifically postpartum, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so I mean, you said prevention. Prevention is my passion, right? In terms of, why do we need to step into some of the challenges? Why do we need to struggle before we say, ooh, I need some help? So I'm all about prevention. And what can we do to prevent or to prepare? I want you to, take a workshop. I want you to learn about, what are the expectations of what postpartum looks like. And it's so interesting because, again, very often we don't talk about expectations and we lean into assumptions, but our assumptions are not always accurate. And so what we want to be able to do instead is to help set accurate expectations instead of relying on those assumptions to set us up for success.
Yeah.
We want to do things, really pragmatic things, to help the relationship between partners, right? So partners, if you're listening, or ladies, you'll share it with your partner. I am a big believer that dating is a lifelong experience. You're in a committed relationship. You maybe decided to have a baby. Maybe you have a baby. Doesn't matter. You should still be dating. Honey, if you're listening, right, we're due for one. I'm just saying.
Especially now.
Especially now. And again, having a baby comes with 2 new best friends: creativity and flexibility. So even though we're in COVID and we're in this, shelter in place, it doesn't mean we don't date, right? Take your iPad into the car, go park up in Mulholland, and there you have a drive-in movie, right? Do something fun. Don't get stuck in the work and the drudgery. And again, you really want to educate yourself. You really want to inform yourself. You really want to understand what are the areas where people get in trouble or where people struggle, so that we can plan beforehand, because planning is power.
Right. And she's going to make this really easy for you, because as of right now, we have collaborated on / she has written this amazing course for you guys that is officially live. I will link it down below with a promo code for 10% off to take her class called the After Birth Plan class. And she literally talks you through all the things you need to be aware of to set yourself up, all the signs and symptoms of maybe things that you should be aware of that may be like warning signs. Do you want to say anything else about it? Otherwise, we'll let them take it. You can take module 1 for free. So
module 1 for free. It's for free, right? And again, it was just a act of passion putting it together, because truly that is my life's work in terms of helping couples prepare and just actualize the excitement of it. And really, if we talk about how we met, sure, we met through Elliot, but oh my God, did we become soul sisters over the course of this experience and the multitude of other things that we did.
Well, and guys, I would just say, like, so Alyssa brought me on to kind of help coach this class and get it launched and off the ground. And I'd be looking at this content and be like, this is so valuable. Like, this is it. Yes, that needs to be identified. Yes, I see this in this way. And then we'd get talking about stories and like all this stuff. So I'm so excited that you guys can take this course now, that this information is finally out there. It's been an act of love. What, you started putting it together like 7 years ago or something?
Seriously, yes.
Was it 7?
It was 7 years ago. And thank you, Sarah, for bringing us to that finish line.
You're welcome, because I see the value. In fact, this is what's going to turn into our book, because it just literally is essential information. And so often you do so much prep for birth, and then you're like, whoa, hitting like a truck in postpartum of like, what am I going to do in this area, like to stay healthy / I'm seeing the decline in my relationship, or I'm getting really sucked into everything revolving around my baby and I'm losing myself. And that's not what we want. We want you to thrive as new parents. We want you to thrive in your personal relationships and in your relationship with your baby. And that class is going to get you there. The other thing I want to bring up is support groups.
Yes.
We have put together some support groups for you. They are weekly for the next few weeks. So you can go over to bundlebirth.com/online events. Everything will be in the description box down below. If you want to sit in on a call and try out a support group idea, they're very affordable. We will both be there supporting you, listening to you, offering support and guidance and tools like this. If this is something that definitely you want to continue in conversation with, we want to be able to provide those resources to you. And so I hope, guys, that this was super valuable. Thank you to all of you guys who have stuck around, because I know this was way longer than I anticipated. This is probably like 15 YouTube videos all in one. So once this shelter in place has lifted, I'm going to have her back, and we're going to have to do like a series on mental health for the channel and just talk through some of these issues again with some practical tools. But in the meantime, this will be live forever, so you can go back and rewatch it if you have missed something. If you have other ideas for future videos, go ahead and comment in the comment box down below. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do, so that you don't miss those future videos, because I already have filmed, like, I have a lot of really fun topics coming. So I just got to like work my way to editing and releasing them to you. But there is more super fun, super interesting, empowering information coming to you. If you need more from me, you can go over to bundlebirth.com. Everything's in the description box down below. Thank you so much for being here, Alyssa. This was super fun. And again, like, we could just keep talking forever, but we won't, for the sake of everybody else. And also, if you don't follow us on Instagram, we are both on Instagram. I will link her handle below. If you need one-on-one therapy support from a perinatal psychologist, she is there for you to listen and interact and do one-on-ones as well. All the things, so many resources. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. And then until next time, don't forget to flex and flow. And then we will see you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.